This setup right here has been gaining in popularity by leaps and bounds, and we're actually going to get to see why. We'll watch a jig with the Finesse TRD as a trailer, a 5-inch salt impregnated stick bait, and finish up with the 4-inch Big TRD, and I can't wait. Well, you're just going to have to wait to the end to see why I like this one so much. Here's what we've got first. I took a 3/8 ounce football jig and put a Finesse TRD on it. I didn't shorten it. This is the full length, and of course the TRDs are Elastec and very buoyant. And as you can see, as soon as we get underwater, why this little compact setup is so appealing to bass. Talk about a bite-sized morsel that is not overly long, but still has some bulk to it. And depending on where and how the jig head lands, the rig may fall over, it may stand up at an angle, and a lot of times stand up absolutely straight, especially after you give it a small little pop and it falls back down vertically. It often just stands straight unless it lands on a slope of some sort. And when this jig in Finesse TRD lands at an angle, it really reminds me of a craw in a defensive position. And at first you may think, well, that would be a bad thing, right? That bass tend to avoid the pincers on a crawfish. Well, we need to refer back to an older article in Bassmaster, and I think you're going to find this pretty interesting. Well, Pure Fishing did some studies on how bass approach soft plastic crawfish imitating baits. John Prochnow, I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. He's a product development manager, or was at this time at Pure Fishing, in some studies that were led by Dr. Keith Jones, and a lot of us have heard Dr. Jones's name many years in the bass fishing industry. So they started off with soft plastics that had all the appendages on there, then they went and removed one of the pincers, then the other one, and then they would start to remove the legs as well. And what they found is that the soft plastics that had no appendages on them got the greatest number of strikes. And I find this really interesting. As John talked about, they wanted to take this to market, but their research showed them that consumers wouldn't buy it. Well, I don't know about you, but take a look at this jig with this Finesse TRD. Even in the defensive position, it kind of looks like a craw with no pincers on it. Well, does this make the difference? Is this why this setup is so popular? Well, I'll leave that up to you as you go ahead and experiment and research this on your own over the course of the season, and let me know what you find out. Now let's go ahead and move on to the jig with the 5-inch stick bait. Now this one is Elastec, but it is heavily salt impregnated, and we know that salt impregnated lures like to sink. So as we would think, this particular 5-inch trailer does not stand up straight on the jig, but it still looks really good, especially when it's coming up and over the rocks. It's very soft. It has a nice subtle action to it. And even when we move it over here to this boat ramp in this flat space, when you can see when we pop it and it lands, that tail just has this nice slow falling over action. So no, it doesn't stand up like the Finesse TRD does, but I would still think that this is something that could draw some very nice strikes, maybe from bigger bass, and it's something that I would definitely want to mix in with the other to see what the bass are doing, how they're reacting on that particular day. Now, before we get into the Big TRD, the 4-inch version, just a quick reminder, my Bass Behavior Bundle is coming out March 15th. You can follow the link down below to get on the waiting list. Great way to support the channel. Thank you. Now, here is my favorite one, the jig with the 4-inch Big TRD, and I switched locations for this one to a spot that had a lot more muck, leaves, bottom junk, and moss. And as you can see, with the Elastec buoyant plastic, this 4-inch version is long enough that it can be visibly seen even with a softer bottom composition. Even if the main part of the jig falls down in debris, that 4-inch tail stands up straight. And as we have seen in many other underwater videos I've done here, bass have zero hesitation of going down in the garbage and rooting out something to eat. We've seen it again and again and again. And I just keep coming back to that research by Pure Fishing that a soft crawl with no pincers got more strikes. I just think this imitates that really well. And we all know as bass anglers, for some reason, that these stick baits just get bit. And hey, if you want to watch a video that talks about some modifications that we can do for crankbaits for pressured bass, go ahead and check this one out right here. And make sure that you go out and encourage someone today. You never know how you might just change their life. For the Bass Fishing Life, I'm your host, Steve Rogers.